It is so good to see you.
It has been too long, honestly. It's really great to see you.
Really long. It's weird. It's a weird season because normally we would see each other a couple times a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a whole group of us would see each other a couple times a year, you know, at a business conference. And it's been years.
COVID.
I know.
Yes.
It's really weird. It's like you don't realize how valuable that kind of built-in rhythm is of seeing people.
Exactly. So it's just a delight to see your face, even if it's not in person.
You too. Okay, I'm going to start with something just completely frivolous and meaningless.
Okay, sure.
But you and I have been longtime wearers of the blacks and grays, and you've been dipping your toes in the waters of pattern mixing.
I have. This is the darkest thing I've worn green. This is one of the darkest things I've worn in a while. Yes, it's been a little weird. I actually started 2019 was when I started because I have a sister-in-law who I adore, my husband's younger sister, and she is insane with color. Right? Like she's insane. Her house looks like a dollhouse. Like her kitchen's bright red and and her clothes, like she just does not care. Whatever patterns, if that's what, and it looks amazing on her. And I was telling her, she was visiting the Christmas of 2018. And she said, I was like, you are fearless. And if I tried to do this, I would look like a clown. Like I would look like and she's like, you wouldn't look like a clown. Just wear what feels right.
Look like a clown. You look
amazing. Thank you. Well, thank you. And actually my house, I'm pretty fearless with pattern and color in my house, always have been. Mm-hmm. But for some reason for me, I was like, black is good, you know, and then also that black is slimming and, you know, like there's that whole trope that I bought into and everything. Yes. So I have been, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it. So yes.
I love it. I'm always seeing you on Instagram, like, oh, that looks so good. And I'm the same way. Like my house is full of color, but yeah.
Yeah,
You're inspiring me.
Try it.
I know. Okay, so I want to talk about your book today, The Lightmaker's Manifesto. Gorgeous book. I loved it so much. So my first question for you, just as a fellow author, is talk to me about the process of writing this book and the timeline, because I'm guessing you were midway through writing when pandemic happens, when
I was just beginning writing. When pandemic happened. So I would love to say that this was a book that I had wanted to write all my life, and that's not true. Like the book came to me because a publisher reached out to me and said, I've been subscribed to your newsletter and I have a book that you contributed an essay for, and our publisher is looking for a book on the intersection of joy and activism.
Yeah. And
we think you could write it. And I think it was like January 2nd of 2020 when she reached out to me. And I said yes, because of basically a New Year's resolution that I was going to be more bold and experimental. And I was like, sure, I can totally do this. Right.
Yeah.
And really had no idea how I was going to do it. But I knew I loved interviewing people. Yeah. And so I thought, well, I know lots of people who are activists. I'm certainly not an activist, I thought to myself. But I know a lot of people who are, and so I'll just interview them. And in my mind, an activist was somebody who gets tear gassed or, you know, gets police dogs set on them. And I made this list of people, and I realized people like Brene Brown or Tarana Burke are not people that I necessarily associate with getting tear gassed or getting. And so I really was like, okay, I want to explore this. Like, what does it mean to be an activist? And is it possible to do it without like just succumbing to despair?
Yeah.
And so I started like doing it, and I think signed the deal in March 2020. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you remember March 2020, that's when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
That's when, and George Floyd was still alive at that time. Breonna Taylor was still alive at that time.
Right.
So it was insane. And I think by like April or May, my publisher called me, and she's great. Her name's Valerie. And Valerie called and said, I am so sorry. Like she goes, I feel like I owe you a huge apology making you write this book during this insane time. And I told her, I said, actually, it's been a gift, because I would read the headlines and then have an interview scheduled with somebody who was fighting for, the recently incarcerated rights or women or people at the border. And it gave me some hope, right? Like it was a really, I don't know that I could have gotten through, honestly, 2020 the way I did if I hadn't had those interviews.
That's so interesting.
It was really weird because I think most people, when I would tell them I'm writing a book on joy and activism, people would go like, is that a thing? Like, does that really happen? And I was like, apparently it is. And I'm learning as I write this book as well. So it was very serendipitous in many ways that I got to write it then.
So you're a couple months into your book, pandemic hits.
Yep.
George Floyd sparks a national discourse on race.
Yep.
It's a discourse you've been part of for a long time.
Yes.
But it feels like that was the maybe national moment of reckoning.
Yes. One of them. I mean, I think there have been reckonings on race a lot, right?
It feels
a
like
lot
that
just
was
in
the
our
one
lifetime.
where, the people who haven't been talking about this at all stepped in. Some.
Yeah. I do remember when George Floyd happened. And to this date, by the way, I've never seen the tape. Like I can't look at the tape.
Yeah.
But I do remember when it happened thinking, why are people reacting to this now? Like we've had a lot of people who have died.
Remember the other ones?
Exactly. Right. So I remember that feeling. So I think to that, yes, I think that there was a sudden explosion of this is not right. But I mean, those of us who are of color, I mean, we've been staring a long time. Yeah. So
right.
So, but I think that's right. I do remember at that point going, I can't believe people are finally taking this seriously. And what is it about this tape? And, then people are like, well, it's 8.5 minutes of watching the man die. Right. Like, which is a little bit different than all of the other tapes that we've seen and or videos. Sorry. I always feel like that ages me when I say tapes, but when I see the videos of them, right? Like that was something.
Yeah. How did that change, or did it change what you were writing as you're seeing, people engage in this that previously haven't?
That's a great question. I don't know that it changed my writing. I mean, I really sort of knew that, what emerged actually from the book, from writing the book, was that activism, for there to be any longevity in it, is really a cadence and a rhythm, right? And Valerie Kaur talks about it. She's an amazing civil rights activist, and she uses the allegory of the midwife, right? So when you're giving birth, it's not breathe, 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 and never push. And it's not push, 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 and never breathe. But there's a really sort of rhythm to it. And so that became, to me, very apparent watching the protests. Like nobody can just protest and scream and argue and be angry every single day for a long time. Like you can certainly do it, but at some point, of course, you're going to burn out or get exhausted, or your body is just going to say, yeah, we're done, right? Like something is going to happen. So if anything, it became even more apparent that sort of that rhythm is really important. And I think for people who have not been activists before, I think the perception is that the breathing part is maybe self-indulgent or maybe, privileged even. Like, I think a lot of people think, well, if I have to turn away, then, that's lazy. Or if I have to turn off the news, that's, then you don't really care enough. And I think the people who have been doing this work for a while will tell you, no, sometimes you have to do that. If not just to recover, but also to regather your energy to go back in, right? It can be a mindful, intentional way to gather that energy again and go back in. It's not just about going and licking your wounds or anything like that. So that became really, really clear, crystal clear as I was doing it. So that I think would probably be the big thing. And also some people, for some people, marching is not their thing. Like their activism can look as many different ways as there are activists, right?
Absolutely.
So sometimes it's calling your elected officials. Sometimes it's letter writing. Sometimes it's knitting things to raise money. Like sometimes it's hosting a gala event, right? Like to as a fundraiser. Like there's all kinds of ways to be an activist. And I think that was probably something that, I probably knew at some level, but I don't think I knew it in a really conscious way until after I wrote the book.
Yeah. And I loved that your book really juxtaposed a number of people who are activists in really different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was really lucky because the people who I interviewed were very generous with their wisdom, but also they were very, very diverse. There were many different races. They were different ages. Some of them were liberals. Some of them were conservatives. Like I don't talk about politics in the book specifically. I avoid it intentionally because everybody can be an activist. But it was really sort of interesting that, some people were religious. I have a minister that I interview and a Sikh faith leader. And some people were agnostic or atheists, right? So it was very much, I wanted it to be something that anybody could sort of hook into and sort of see themselves in some way and inspire themselves to go and try to make a change for the better.
Yeah. Talk to me about this term Lightmaker. What's the Venn diagram between Lightmaker and activist?
Yeah. So the way that I defined activism is somebody who is led by their values to do something purposeful for the hope of making the world better for other people. A light maker. So part of the making the world better and making the world brighter for other people, that's definitely hooks into making light. But there's also part of it that I don't think activists or books on activism talk about that much is there is a way to hook into the thing that brings you joy, whatever that may be, whether it's podcasting or, there's a way to hook into that to be an activist so that it's not, for example, people have told me in the past, Karen, you have a law degree, maybe you should run for office. I can't think of anything that I would hate more, right?
Right.
So whether or not I'm qualified to do it or I'm
and you'd probably be amazing.
Well, thank you. I would be miserable, right? I couldn't do it for a long time because I would just be miserable at it. And I think that's the thing. Like people think, oh, well, if you're an activist, you must march. Well, if that's not something that turns you on, then don't do it, right? Like do the thing that you would do no matter what, whether you got paid for it or not, figure out a way how to make that thing be of service, right? And that's part of the light maker. So it's not just making light for other people, but making it for yourself and sort of cultivating that joy for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the person, and you talk about this in the book, the person who goes, well, I don't think I'm an activist because I don't have a platform. I don't have a podcast. I'm not a writer. I'm not a leader. What does everyday activism look like for the person who isn't an influencer but wants to step in?
Yeah, I can't answer that because it's going to be different for every person. I will say that many people have contacted me, people I know and people who I don't know, total strangers, have contacted me and said, I didn't realize that I was an activist, but I think I might be, right? And so like, for example, my dad doesn't have a platform. He's in his 80s. And he was the first person who said, I think I've been an activist all my life. And one of the things he does right now, so he has a PhD in engineering, right? He's a math genius. And he goes to the Fifth Ward of Houston, which is sort of the impoverished area of Houston, and he tutors kids mathematics, and he goes in every Saturday, and that's his thing, and he loves it. And my father is a born teacher, right? Like he loves teaching. He's 80 years old, and that's something that he can do. Now, does the whole world know about it? Well, I mean, they do now because I'm on your podcast, but most people don't know. And that's the other thing, because I think a lot of people in this day and age where if you have a latte, you got to take a picture of it and share it to the world, right? Like most people don't know this is something my dad does, but he is, again, being led by his values to make the world brighter for other people. And that's what it takes. So it's just looking around, listening to the whisper, the thing that says, you could probably help here. You could probably do something. Yeah. And then just doing it. And it doesn't have to be big. No, even Mandela and Gandhi weren't big at the beginning, right? Like they were just doing what they did what they could. And that's how it starts.
You used a quote in your book. I don't remember it exactly, but it was like the real OGs move in silence.
Yeah, for sure. That's right. It's something that you just, and honestly, especially when I think this is especially true for if you are wanting to do activism on behalf of a community of which you're not a member. Right. So, for example, if you want to be an ally, right, I think it's really sort of behooves you to sort of move in silence, learn from the people who are doing it well, right? Learn how you can help those people who do it well. Yeah. And just slowly do what you better. You don't have to broadcast it. Totally. And especially, this is something I always tell people, especially when it comes to allyship for race, right? Like one thing that happened after George Floyd, for example, with a lot of white friends would be like, what can I do? Karen, tell me what I can do. And I'm like, I don't know. I've never been in your shoes. So I don't know what to tell you. Right. Right. But if those friends had instead gone to white friends who they saw doing great work, right? Like those are the people that can help, teach you and tell you. So look for the people that you have something in common with who are doing the work well. Yeah. And ask them. And then understand that you're going to screw up. Everybody screws up at sometimes. Yes. So being able to take accountability and, say, yeah, that's on me. I did that. I've learned and keep moving on. I mean, I think that's really a big part of it as well.
Absolutely. When you're talking about, different ways of engaging and how one thing isn't for everyone. And also when you talk about white people messing up, I'm reminded of, I can remember, I had gone to New York to protest Eric Garner and to be involved in a community action and a march. And I can remember that we were marching past my nephew's house who lived in Union Square. Okay. And so I'm texting him and I'm like, you got to come down here. Like we're walking right by. This is so important. You got to come down here. And I'm white, he's black. And I remember him texting me back and being like, this marching is not for me. Yeah. That's not how I choose to engage. Yeah. Now, the way he has chosen to engage is he now has a huge knitting charity that provides warm clothing and hats to LGBT homeless youth in the city. And I was reading this book and I just couldn't stop thinking of him because knitting, who would have thought, right? Like, right. But he totally, took those steps you said, where he looked at things he loves and the cause he loves. Yeah. And he found this route that was so unexpected. And now, he has this huge thing. So, and
I love that he told you that this is not my thing. He was very clear about that boundary. Like, that's so cool. And that's really a big part of the book, right? Like there's a lot, I'm a big journaler. So I talk a lot about journaling and doing the introspection. And I think when you get really clear on what your values are and what your cause is and what you want to help, then you can feel freer to say no to other things. Because I think that's the other thing, right? Is a lot of people are like, well, if you care about like the civil rights of people of color, then why don't you care about the environment? Because the environment is and you can say, you know what? It's not that I don't care about the environment, but my focus is on this. Yes. And I trust there are other people whose focus is the environment, and I will trust that they'll be doing their work. So, but you can only do that when you get very, very clear on what you want to do and what your cause is and what your gift is that you can provide toward that cause. Then it becomes easier to be very, very clear about that. So that's what I love about your nephew going, yep, that's not it. This is mine, I know. Right. That's so great. That's really,
and
really
me
wonderful.
Also just being so clueless of like, this is what we do.
Right.
Like this is the thing. Why aren't you doing the thing?
Right. And I mean, I think it's easy to do, especially when you're passionate about something. Right. Like, it's one of those things. And I will tell you, like the cause that I do not do enough is environment. I care about the environment. Of course, I believe in the science, but I don't compost, for example, right? And like there are things that I'm sure I could be doing, and I have to be very clear. Like I'm not wasteful. Like I recycle, and but I'm sure there's always more you could do. I could become a vegetarian. There's other things that I can do. And there's a part of me that's like, you know what, if I start looking everywhere, because as soon as I do that, then I'm going to worry about foster kids, or then I'm going to worry about like immigration, or then I'm going to worry about like, there's so many causes that are out there that if you start to do that, that will burn you out. And you have to get very, very clear on what it is that your cause is going to be.
Yeah. And I appreciate that emphasis on also self-care in the middle of it too.
Oh, yeah.
Because I definitely know there have been times in my life where I have been motivated for justice in such a way that I was almost self-flagellating.
Sure. Yeah.
Couldn't take a break. If I took a break, that was privilege, shoving my face into things to the point of it not being healthy.
Yeah. And, one of the people that I interviewed, Jeff Harry, who's great, and he's a play coach. He talks about how, I think in the book, he said something like play is as important as like sleeping and eating or something like that.
Yeah.
And his point is that at play, which is often done without really any goal, it's something that you do for fun. Sometimes you get into a flow state, that's where creativity and that's where connection can happen. And that's where innovation can happen. And where else would you need creativity, connection, and innovation, but for activism?
Yeah.
And sort of being able to weave that in, that sort of self-care, that celebration when you make progress, that gratitude for progress that you've made, that connection of being able to talk to friends who are not only doing the work with you, but celebrate you, or maybe even like pick you up when things start to feel a little desperate. Like all of those things are the way that you have the longevity in the work, because you want to be doing this for a long time. You don't want to burn out. That's not the point. It doesn't help the cause to burn out. Right. Yeah. So you have to be able to have that rhythm and have that self-care and do it without guilt. Right. Like do it like, and for me, the way that I do it without guilt is it's not a sign of weakness to rest. The rest is the way that I gather my energy to go back in.
Absolutely.
Right. That it is the mindful, purposeful thing that I'm doing so that I can go in and be clear-headed and focused and ready to push again. And that for me has been very perspective shifting for me, so don't feel guilty. You have to do it in order to be like full strength to go back in and keep going.
And that self-care feels like it's all the more important for in-group versus out-group, right? So if I'm a white person who's trying to be an activist for immigrants or for people of color, it feels like all the more important for people of color who are in these spaces.
Oh, I see.
To be finding that rest.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think if you are devoted and focused at making change, that there's always going to be compassion fatigue, for example. There are different things. And I would hate to rank the suffering, right? Because people feel the suffering in different ways. I would simply say that it's important for everybody. It's important for everybody to really tap into that rhythm. And yes, for some people, they need it more frequently, and some people they don't. And and we just have to be really introspective and listen to what it is, and also respect when people say, I can't right now. I can't do it right now. Yeah. And I've become very, very good at being able to say, I can't right now. Like, it's just like, just being really boundaried about what I'm capable of and what I'm not, for sure.
You've always been my friend who's just like the example of boundaries. I feel like there's times like we've been sitting around, people are talking, it's late, and you're like, I'm going to bed. I'm going to drink my tea in my room.
I know. I have people tell me that, I'm like, I don't know if people are trying to tell me like, you are so antisocial. I am deeply introverted. That is very, very true. And yes, I mean, I love people. I love people, but
you love yourself also.
I love myself deeply. And also I can't, I'm just not an extrovert. Like I don't get my energy from people. I get it from solitude. And so it's either I leave or I stay and be cranky. And trust and believe you would rather me just go ahead and make a graceful exit.
And I'm introverted too. And I stay and then I'm blitzed the next day.
It can be very, very, I'm very, very mindful of that. But that, that came with getting older as well. Like I don't know that I was that good at it in my 20s, but I'm definitely good at it now. So
talk to me about information seeking, because I feel like your book talks about this a little bit, but I feel like I watch these two kind of polar extremes at times in terms of ideology. One is I have to be informed all the time. I need to be staying on Twitter. I always have to be in the news. If I take a break from the news, I'm privileged in ignoring the news. Yeah. And so I even have in my counseling practice some clients where I've had to say like, you have to be off Twitter for some hours. But then I feel like there's this other ideology, which is, I'm going to manifest joy, and I'm going to do that by only looking at the things that are joyful. And and I'm only going to bring in my orbit things that make me feel positive. And like, how do we find that balance between, I want to be informed. I want to be, I don't want to be toxic positivity, la, 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 everything's fine. Yeah. But I also don't want to be swimming in the news.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it requires some self-discipline, right? Yeah. Like for sure. I will say that, like, for example, I don't have cable. I don't have cable. Right. So I have Netflix and streaming platforms, but I don't have cable, and I don't watch the news on television or even online. I don't watch it. I am I wake up in the morning, I dip in with headlines. Yes. I look and see, so I know kind of what's going on in the world.
Kind of a broad look,
what's going on. I mean, and that was in 2020, that was hard because 2020, like everything was on fire. It was hard. It was really, really tough. But I am not a person that, like my parents, for example, they have the news on all the time. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that. Like that's crazy making. Yeah. So I think you can I think you can be enough like on headline and then back off. Yeah. And also sort of know now, you know me, right? I'm beauty of different girl. Like I love beauty, right? Like I'm a photographer. I go look for beauty. I tend to not share dark, awful things online on my own platform, for example, right? So the other thing that I think that you can do is if you see something difficult, and this is not Pollyanna stuff, but if you see something difficult or challenging, challenge yourself to find the people who are doing something about it, or find the way that you could, because literally, and this was what the book taught me, right? That with the worst, most awful news that's out there, there is somebody out there that's like, yep, that's not going to work for me. And they're doing something to counteract it. Right. For every darkness, there is light. Yeah. And I think that being able to have sort of the discipline to go and look for that, or follow the people on Twitter who you find do that a lot, or Instagram, or like that for me is a balm, right? Yeah. Really sort of going, this person is awesome. They're putting great stuff in the world. And so I can counter some of it. But it's, it's a balance and it's self-discipline. Yeah. It really is.
It is. In a lot of ways. Is. Yeah, it really is a discipline. Yeah. I found it to be incredibly difficult last year, as the pandemic started, to not be scrolling news about that. And then and then to not be scrolling about news about what protests are happening and what people are saying, and feeling the need to get in there and,
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I talk about in the book, and I always I share this because to me, it was one of the things that transformed my own activism was, of course, again, journaling. But there's 3 questions that I ask myself every day, every morning. And it's, how can I feel healthy? How can I feel connected? How can I feel purposeful? And if you ask yourself and answer those questions for yourself every day, and then whatever the answers are, put them in your to-do list, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times that can help you do that. So if you're like, how can I feel healthy today? You know what? I don't feel healthy because I've been watching this. So today I'm not going to look at anything, right? How can I feel connected today? You know what? I'm feeling a little fragile. I have this friend that's always there to listen, or that makes me laugh, or what, and really sort of checking in with yourself literally daily. How can I do that is really, really helpful.
I loved those prompts. I really did. I actually would really like to start using them myself, because my goodness, I mean, what an intention setter.
It's such a great, and I would, I'd love to claim it for myself. I didn't make it up. Malika Chopra, I think, was the person I originally heard that from, but it's really transformational. And so, sometimes how can I feel healthy means I'm going to go spend an hour and a half at the gym, but sometimes how can I feel healthy is I'm going to have a disco nap, right? Or a media break, or drink extra water, or whatever it is. And just sort of having that habit of checking in can really be helpful.
Absolutely. I listen to podcasts in the morning when I get ready, which is kind of how I absorb my news. And I have a couple that I will go through NPR and the Daily, and I have been trying to follow my gut as I'm listening, like, is this making my gut upset?
Yeah.
And if it is, do I need to listen to the rest of this epidemiologist interview or should I turn it off? Right? Like, I'm not in denial that there's a pandemic.
Yep.
But is this information, is this
making you ill?
Out?
Yeah. Is it making you sick? Is it making you mentally not fit? Right.
So I'm going to push pause and I'll come back to it. I'll find the information at a different time or in a different way. And that's been really helpful for me, because I feel like a year ago, I would have just pushed through. You got to listen, listen.
Oh no, don't do that. Don't do that. We need you here, right? We need you here. And you're not going to stay. You're not going to be here if you keep doing that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about the Star Collective and what that means in your life.
Yeah. So it was funny. I used to use the word war council, which sounds a little bit, it's a little aggressive, but so Star Collective for me are the people who are, yes, very dear friends for sure. Sometimes mentors and not necessarily close friends, but right now, if I think of the people in my Star Collective, they're very, very close friends who get me, and by get me, I don't just mean they understand me and so they just make me feel good, but they can also call me out on my shit, right? Like if I'm right, and so important. It's so important, and I think some of the people that are in my Star Collective are people because they've been on all of these yearly visits that we used to have before the pandemic. But these are the people that they understand what's really important for me, what my causes are, what it can feel too much and what can feel empowering. And if I'm in crisis, they know how to handle me, right? They know not to bother me when I don't want to be bothered, or bother me when I need to be bothered, right? And they're people that I trust implicitly, but they are also people for whom I do the same. Yeah. Like it has to be mutual, right? Yeah. So, and I will tell you, one of the people that's coming to mind right now is Laura May, is a very good friend of mine and a friend of yours. And Laura is probably the person who lives closest to me, and she lives 2.5 hours away. Yeah. Right. So they don't necessarily have to be local. It's nice if they are, but they can be anywhere. Others live on the other side of the country. Yeah. And they can be, men, women, whatever, but these are the people that just really fully have your back. Totally. And will tell you with kindness when, you're going off track. You're not in your values right now. Right. And it's good to have. I have probably 4 or 5 I can think of maybe on the outside. Some people have 1, some people have 20, I don't think there's a specific number, but they're the people you can count on for sure.
Yeah. I have a group like that, and none of us are local, and we call ourselves cheerleaders and ass kickers. Nice. Right? An equal mix of both. Yes. Yeah. I will cheer you on all the live long day, but if you're being an asshole, I will tell you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Or if you're excited about something and you're like, that you say you're excited about this, but this is not who you are, right? That you're able to say, I want to ask you some questions just to sort of poke at it.
Yeah.
And see if this is really, truly what you want. And those people are really in value, because sometimes you can be like, you see something shiny and you think that's what I want. And it really isn't what you want. And your friends can kind of go, well, think about it. And also these are people that are really excited when you succeed, right? Like there's no jealousy, right? Like there's not this,
totally.
Why did that happen to you? No, they don't. They're like almost more excited for you. Yeah. When great things happen to you, for sure. And that's hard to find sometimes.
It is hard to find. It is very hard to find. And I think that is a constant pruning too, right?
Yes,
because
for sure.
Sometimes you don't know that until you do succeed. And then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Person.
And I think as the world gets more polarized, I mean, for me anyway, let me not speak for everybody, but like I had a mentor for years that as the world became more polarized, I realized that we did not share the same values. Yeah. And it was heartbreaking because he had been somebody I'd looked up to forever. Yeah. And then I realized, oh, maybe we're different people. Yeah. Or he's different from, and being able to, say, maybe this person isn't in that group anymore. Yeah. And it's not personal. Yeah. Right. It's that it just is not a fit anymore. Yeah. And being able to be comfortable different. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. That's hard. That's really hard. Something you, one of the lines in the book that was like for me was many, but when you were talking about the aftermath of the hurricane, which Hurricane Harvey you guys lived through. Yeah. And there was a moment where, I don't remember if it was you saying it to your husband or him saying it to you, but it was, I want to make this the most meaningful thing that has happened to us. Yeah. And that was so powerful to me because I've had some of those crisis moments. I've been in a natural disaster. I've had some other traumatic things happen. And you didn't say, I want this to be the best thing that ever happened to us. Right. You said meaningful. Right. Yeah. And that, I loved that. How did you go about creating meaning from something that was horrendous for you to live through? Yeah. So we lost our home in Harvey. We lost everything. And how do we do it day by day, right? Moment by moment. Because I don't know that we had a real plan of what that would look like. I would say, now almost 5 years later, like it was probably, I would say it was certainly the most meaningful time of my family's life, right? Collectively. But, I actually just yesterday, I was reading a friend's bio on Instagram or something. And they said, my favorite mantra is not, it's not what happened, it's what happens next. Yeah. Right. And I love that. I'm like, oh, that's exactly it. Right. Like, I think it's, and I'm a generally optimistic person anyway, but I'm like, I just kept thinking, this can't be the end of the story. Right. Like losing everything can't be the end of the story. Like that's and so we were very, we were mindful, like we sort of circled our wagons, the three of us, and like made sure that we were all okay. And, I'm a huge, it's trite now at this point because everybody says it, but I am a huge practitioner of gratitude and have since I was in my 20s. And so every day we thought about what good thing happened. And sometimes it was, a total stranger came and helped us muck out our house. That was amazing. Or somebody brought us a casserole. That's incredible.
Strangers picked you up in a boat.
Strangers picked us up in a boat, right?
Exactly. Your life in a boat.
With raging. Yeah. Like sometimes, and it was so, sometimes it was, I remember like the water stayed in our house for 2 weeks. And my husband kept wading into the house and trying to salvage stuff and coming back. And probably a week in, he thought, the water was disgusting, right? It was gross and dank. And he goes, I wonder if my tetanus is up to date. And I was like, oh, that's probably important, right? And so he went to the grocery store and they had a tetanus shot, right? Yeah. The pharmacy. And so like, that was a thing. Thank God we could get tetanus, the tetanus shot when we needed it. So, sometimes it creeps up on you on what the good thing is, but I've never had a day where I've not been able to come up with something. Sometimes it's little, but I can always come up with something. And And it's important because if you keep a practice of it, right? When things are good, it's easy. But then when things are tough, you already have the practice. And so you start to look for it, and you start to look for it during your day, right? Like you're like, okay, oh, that just happened. All right, I got to remember that tonight, right? And that's how you build resiliency, right? Like for me, it's 100% how we made it through.
Yeah.
And I don't even have I have no sense of loss around that. And we lost everything. It is 100% gratitude. You know, it is 100%. Wow, people were amazing, amazing in that moment, which was great. And remember, it was 2017. We'd just come off a crazy election, right? So people were really, really polarized, and none of that mattered. Like it was the one time where we didn't have to think about politics or anything. We were just all in it together. And that's really kind of beautiful.
It is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, you said it's not about what happens, it's about what happens next. You are about to launch your child.
Yeah.
You're a year ahead of me, a step ahead of me. What comes next? Karen, how are you doing with this?
Oh, it's nuts, right? Yeah. So my daughter's a senior.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for her to make a damn decision, right? She's got a few acceptances. She's waiting for one in particular before she makes her decision. It's killing me dead. So what's next is, she goes to college, which is amazing and wonderful. This year is actually a really, really pivotal year for me personally, because my daughter turns 18.
Yeah.
She graduates high school. She goes to college. My husband and I celebrate 20 years married. I turn 55. So, and I become an empty nester. All of those things are happening right now. And as it happens, because thanks to everybody's wonderful kindness, the Lightmaker's Manifesto has done very well in sales. And so I have another book deal. And so I'm sort of writing about this year, about the sort of the clearing of the slate and how exciting that is, right? Like
what
all
a timely
the potential.
Book.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to writing it. I'm having fun, and part of it is getting to wear lots of different bright colors and figuring out how to set the stage for what's next. So I'll let you know definitively what's next, but I'm working on it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. All right. My last question for you is, you're raising a Gen Zer.
I am.
As am I. What about Gen Z is giving you hope for the future?
So much. So my daughter she goes to a very tiny school, and and her class, I think there's like 20 people in her class, in her senior class. Like it's tiny, and they are incredibly tight knit. Like they, there's always they have a dance, and then they all hang out together after the dance, or they go to each other's sporting events, and the whole class shows up, and it's really, really tight knit. So what I love about them is, first of all, and she also goes to a very diverse school. So her friends are from everywhere, and there are a lot of people who are children of immigrants, if not immigrants themselves. And so the idea of difference being native, how we talk about digital natives, right? Like they don't even think it the people who are digital natives, they just know how to there's something about them that's difference native. The way that they can switch pronouns without thinking about them, which I'm still struggling with, right? Like, with just wait, I don't want to be disrespectful. And it's just fluid, right? Like they're just, the way that they welcome each other. Now, I am very mindful that I live in a bubble, and that may not be true for everybody, but the Gen Zers that I'm surrounded by are in creative. They want to study things in college that I've never heard of, or they want to combine things, well, I'm going to study microphysics and fabric arts, or, these really wild combinations, and they have a facility with what that could look like and what that means that is just really thrilling. They are looking, they're future focused and they're optimistic about it.
Yeah.
Even in face of a lot of things that seem to be on fire.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it for me. I'm really excited. And you caught me at a good time because my daughter had one of her best friends come over for dinner last night. And so we were talking and I was just like, you guys are so awesome. I'm so excited for everything that lies ahead for you, and they're all like planning on going to different like they're not going to be at the same universities when they leave. And they're just great. They're just, I'm really lucky that she's surrounded by really great kids. Thank God,
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah.
What about you? Can you say what is yours? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying the same thing. I feel like they're all just little activists, and their friends are too. And there's just that word native. I mean, it's funny. My kids the other day were watching some Disney show and there was a gay couple in the show. And I was like, oh, they just have like a gay couple as part of the show. And they're like, yeah. Like looking at it. And I was like, you guys, when I was a kid, Ellen was fired from a show.
Right.
She was gay. Like and they're looking at me like, how old are you? Like what world did you come from? And so I feel we had a family member change pronouns. My kids the next day, boom.
The next day. I don't understand how that happens.
Stumbling all over the place, falling, dropping everything. And they're like, Mom.
That's exactly right. Like if somebody introduces me with their pronouns, I'm good.
Right.
But if I've known somebody with one set of pronouns and it's changed, I'm like a bumbling fool. Like I'm a complete idiot. And my daughter and her friends, they're just like, okay, cool. Right. And it's so inspiring. And it's so, I don't know. The kids are going to be all right. The kids are going to be all right. Yeah.
I think they are. Yeah. I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited about your next book.
Thank you. I'm so excited about it too.
Are you writing yet? Or
I'm writing. I was writing right before we got on this. So I'm writing and it's,
awesome.
It's really interesting. Because it's really interesting. I'm learning. It's just like the Lightmaker's Manifesto. Like I'm learning things and I'm learning things about myself, some of which are awesome, some of which are not so awesome, some of which I have to change. And I hope it resonates when it finally comes out in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, where can people buy this guy?
The Lightmakers. Anywhere good books are sold. Yeah. I will say that, we've gone into second printing. So thank you for everybody doing it. But it was a fun book to write, and it is it's an easy book. Like it's a page turner. It's not something that feels heavy or anything else like that. So so yes, please buy them.
Awesome. And where can people find you online, on Instagram, Twitter, all that?
Yeah. So my handle is often Chookalunks, which is really hard for people to remember. So if people go to KarenWalrond.com, that will get you everywhere, and you can find my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything else there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Karen, so much. It was such a delight to talk to you.
It's always such a delight to speak with you. I'm so glad that you